and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is May the 4th, and as some of you Star Wars fans may know, May the 4th is kind of a play on the phrase, May the Force be with you from Star Wars. Most people know me as a Star Trek fan, but I'm not opposed to Star Wars. I like it all right, particularly the originals, the original three. For keeping theme for May the 4th, I figured we'd take a look at something that Obi-Wan Kenobi, the original and the best, a statement that he made, and I want to share it with you guys and take an application from it. So watch this clip real quick with me.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?
Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
So Obi-Wan Kenobi makes a statement. He had told Luke about Darth Vader betraying and destroying or killing his Luke's father, Anakin. And of course, Luke finds out that it wasn't quite as simple as that, but Obi-Wan Kenobi makes a statement that it was true from a certain point of view. And he makes the following statement that many of the truths we cling to rely on a certain point of view. And I kind of want to focus on that for a minute, because there's two different ways that we can actually kind of gain some biblical application with regard to that statement. One of them has to do primarily with the concept of the fact that in our society, truth is a very fluid thing. But despite the fact that people are convinced of certain things, there is an objective truth, and people ignore that in order to interpret facts a certain way in the scientific community and so forth. For instance, with regard to the age of the universe, the age of the earth, because of all these billions of years, obviously the creation account in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2 can't be true. But yet, with a mind of faith, when you consider what's said in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2, notice, first of all, God created the firmament, verses 1 and verses 6 and 7. And he created heaven, which is the firmament, and then there was waters, and the dry land he created, and it appeared, and it was so, verse 9 and 10. And then the earth brought forth grass. And then we find in verse 26 and 27, God created man and woman. And of course, chapter 1 is kind of the overview of creation, whereas chapter 2 goes into a little bit more detail, especially with the creation of Adam and Eve. But when we look at what God did to create the heavens and the earth and man and all of creation, he spoke it into existence. And by God speaking it into existence, he created it to be a certain age. Adam and Eve weren't created as newborns. They were created as full-grown people, as adults. However many years old they would have been, equivalent to, 20, 25, 30, whatever, they were created already aged to a certain point. There's no reason whatsoever to think that God couldn't create the earth to already be certain billions of years old, or the universe to be certain billions of years old. There's absolutely no contradiction in the scientific view of the age of things, okay, not to even get into some of the debatable means by which they date things, carbon and so forth. But all of that taken at face value, it doesn't stand in contradiction to the gospel. and to the Bible. And for that matter, there are those Christian evolutionists who believe in that God created the Big Bang and that he started it all, but then he let it go. And this is an effort to somewhat kind of merge the concept between the age of the universe, the age of the carbon dating of certain fossils and so forth, and try to harmonize it with the Bible. I don't understand what the point of that is. If you believe in an all-powerful God, if you believe that he can do anything, why can't he create the universe a certain age? Why can't he create the earth to be a certain age? And some people focus in on the dinosaur bones and all of that. I'm convinced the dinosaurs were real. I think they existed before the flood. And then after the flood, a whole lot of things changed. Not only did most of the dinosaurs die out, but also the makeup of the atmosphere, the makeup of the air changed. So people no longer lived as long as they did before the flood. And there's no reason to think that that wouldn't have affected all of the animals that existed, that continue to exist, both in the ark that were saved, but also any animals that may have survived outside of the ark, like mainly ocean animals, that type of thing, that probably would have been fine with the flood. So all of that has an explanation, and all of that with a mind of faith makes sense. But yet people present evolution, macroevolution, I should be more specific there. They present macroevolution as being some sort of fact based on, or some sort of truth based on the facts of the age of the universe, the age of the earth, the age of fossils, and so forth. And yet, that isn't, especially from a spiritual perspective, that doesn't have to be the case. If you take into account what God says, and you change your point of view to allow for an all-powerful God, and that is not a problem for those who are faithful people. So when we consider the other aspect to that statement, that many of the truths we cling to kind of depend on a certain point of view, it kind of addresses the idea of truth and whether truth is objective or subjective. And certainly with regard to interpretation of facts, which is, by all accounts, basically how people define truth. It's interpretation of facts. From a human perspective, truth can be biased when you look at it as being interpreted by individual mindsets and individual thoughts. However, the gospel teaches us that, especially as it pertains to spiritual matters and the overarching theme of God being the creator of the universe and everything that exists, that there is an objective truth. There is objective fact that cannot, or should not at least, be interpreted any other way. And while human beings may choose to subjectively interpret things in an effort to redefine God or to try to say that there is no God, there is objective truth. In fact, this is one of the things that John in 1 John deals with in a wide array of ways in which he describes, here's how we know. Here's how we know this. Here's how we know that. He deals with truth as being objective, not as being subjective. And he offers testimony, John does. Notice, the life was manifested, we have seen and bear witness. That which we have seen and heard we declare to you. Here in 1 John chapter 1, verse 1. This is what we saw. This is what happened. And he presents this as being, there is no variation here of subjectiveness. This is what we were eyewitnesses to. And so in a lot of ways, the idea of many of the truths we cling to depend on a certain point of view. It can be utilized kind of in two ways, both in a positive and a negative way. A positive way in the sense of contrary to what people want to interpret facts as being declaration or truth of macroevolution and so forth. If you change your point of view and look at it from the perspective that God created all things, it's not a problem. And in fact, there's really nothing that scientifically anybody can offer or bring up that presents a problem. If you already believe in God, then there is no disharmony with what science will never disprove God. It also can't prove God either. And so there's certain aspects to it that are going to rely on whether or not you have a mind of faith or you have a mind to try to disregard the existence of God. That being the case, on the other hand, you've got objective versus subjective truth, and the fact that some exist within this very subjective gray area realm. And for some things in life, our realities in some ways are based on our perceptions and our interpretations of things. Those are all things that have no impact whatsoever. It's just everyday life type of stuff, how a person says something, this sort of thing. But when it comes to matters of the spirit, matters of the soul, matters of God, and aspects in which God should be taken into account, there is objective truth, and God provides it in the gospel. All right, so that's it for you today. Just something to think about, kind of on theme with the May the 4th. So for those Star Wars fans, hopefully you'll appreciate it, and those who don't, hopefully still this will be a means to kind of think about something. All right, everybody. So Lord willing, I'll see you all again tomorrow evening at 6:30 for our next daily devotional. Y'all have a good night and stay safe.